We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order.
You want to do the pledge?
Yeah, we'll do roll call first.
Pledge and then me and then roll call.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm gonna have to do that one over.
That wasn't very loud and proud, was it?
Wow.
Madam Chair, this is the May 28th meeting of the Board of Adjustments. Pursuant to Executive Order Number 20-69, issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communication technology such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Florida Statute 120.54. Procedures for public comment. By device. If you wish to speak during public comment, click Participants, then click Raise Hand at the bottom of the window. Your microphone will be unmuted when you are called to speak, and you will be invited to activate your camera if you wish. Both will be deactivated once your comment time is completed. Cameras are kept off during other times of the meeting. By phone, press *9 to raise your hand. You will be called by your partially displayed phone number, so please listen for that number. The host will lower your hand and mute your line after speaking. Please state your name and address prior to commenting. Board members are asked to give when roll is called, to indicate whether they're here in person or attending remotely. Thank you.
Chair Stanley,
Here in person.
Vice Chair Fritas,
Here in person?
Board Member Dillon,
Here in person.
Board Member Vogel,
Here, virtual.
Board Member McBride.
Oh, I'm sorry, I took yours.
That's okay.
You can say yours.
I'm here too in person.
I'd also like to remind the board to please speak directly into the microphone, as those who are attending remotely cannot hear you unless you're directly into the microphone. Thank you.
Okay, so the approval of the minutes. Who has the minutes from last?
Chair is looking for a motion to approve the minutes.
Oh,
I would actually like to make a little edit to one of my comments on that before they're approved, if that's okay. Page 2, Alex Gillen said he's not sure how he's supposed to determine certain aspects. I would add, comma, such as a cause, a detrimental effect with respect to drainage. Again, nothing in the document last session.
Hold on.
Where are you at?
Can you just, because it sounded like you were to continue on. Is it such as a cause of
Such
detriment?
as cause a detrimental effect with respect to drainage, which is straight out of the ordinance.
A detrimental effect. So, such as cause of detriment, such as drainage.
Yeah, with respect
Okay.
to drainage. So that's,
With respect to drainage,
yeah,
period.
yes.
And then when your comment that's straight out of the ordinance is just you now comment.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to
Right.
explain it. Thank you,
Right.
Mike, Mr. Martel.
Okay.
I move we approve the minutes
With Mr. Gillen's
with Mr. Gillen's
amendment.
clarification amendment.
Second.
Okay, next we're going to do
Your
a
chair would call a vote on that,
call a vote.
on approving the
On
minutes.
approving the
All in
minutes.
favor?
All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Now you're off to the next agenda.
And we're going to have a 5-minute maximum for comments from the public. We have Paula Nicoletti.
Well, I believe the matters, just for the record, the comments for the public at this time are for matters that are not on the agenda. So if there's a member of the public that wants to comment on something not on the agenda, then please come up now. I believe Ms. Nicoletti is actually wanting to comment
On
on
the agenda.
agenda item number 3, so that would probably wait until we hear the agenda item. But I don't know, is that accurate? Okay.
If there is anyone attending remotely who wishes to give non-agenda public comment, please raise your hand now. See none, Madam Chair.
Now you're in public, now you're in the board.
Okay, next we're going to have comments from the board members regarding the current agenda.
We're proceeding into the agenda.
We're not talking about the agenda item number 3. This is, does the board member have anything, comments they want to talk about from the last meeting? Do you want to talk about anything for procedure for this meeting? Want to comment on the fact that we're all wearing masks, which is unusual?
I'd just like to thank the staff for keeping us up to date on the meetings during this uncertain time.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Helen?
No, thank you.
Okay, other matters before the board?
This brings us to the one matter for tonight, which is variance to reduce minimum lot area and lot width. This is a request for a variance to the city's land development code for a reduced lot area of 9,375 square feet from a 10,000 foot requirement, and a reduced lot frontage of 75 feet where 100 feet is required. The site is located at 1436 Southeast Lark Boulevard in the R1A zoning district in order to accommodate a single family dwelling. The development director, Kevin Freeman, is handling the matter. Mr. Freeman, have it.
Thank you, Mr. Mortel. Just to start with a bit of housekeeping on the agenda item, it was pointed out to me today that on page 13 of 30 in the staff report, the minimum lot width should read 10,000 square feet, not 7,500. And also I noted that in the final order of variance, there's some text being carried through in the header that shouldn't be in there.
What
So
page is that on?
that will be pages 22, 23, and 24 of 30. On the header, it titles it incorrectly. It's carried through from the header of that document.
So it's incorrect, or what should it be?
It should be in the name of Jeffrey and Nanette Walsh, not Elaine Dillard.
I don't know if anybody looking at it electronically, I don't think you have that, because as I'm looking at the
Right.
electronic agenda, I don't.
Okay.
I-
Should be an attachment to the item.
On the top of page 23.
Yeah.
24.
I did have a question. I don't know if it's a relevant question or not. I know that I believe Alex brought us aware of the change that needed to be made of 14 of 31 from the 7,500 square feet to the 10,000
That's well, yes.
through an email. And just out of curiosity, your response was not to reply all. Why is that?
It's best not to communicate between board members.
I
to
didn't know if
Actually,
it was
if I- if-
sunshine.
I could chime in. Alex technically is violating the sunshine. If this was a typo error, so it's not.
Mhm.
But if Alex had said, I'm going to vote no because of that, that would be clearly a violation of sunshine, because it would be directing the other boards as to what he was going to talk
It was
about.
me that
Oh,
sent the email.
okay. Whoever, sorry, Alex.
I don't want to throw one in
Alex
plus.
is like,
Laughing
Anyway.
underneath my laugh.
So for what it's worth,
I'm just curious.
no one on the board should ever, in any way, text, telephone, email, smoke screen, or communicate at all,
Morse code?
Morse code as well, regarding anything on the agenda item.
Right.
Even if we have it flat out wrong, the key is to communicate directly with the development director or myself or the city manager, and then
he reached-
allow us
Okay.
to communicate to the board to avoid, and obviously there was no intention to violate
Right.
sunshine or influence the outcome or anything like that. It was simply somebody caught an error and was being cured. And so what Kevin tried to do is cut it off early and
Right.
say, don't email each other back and forth. This is where this gets away from us.
And I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't sure. So I understand now. And so talk to you first and you go ahead and,
That would be the way we have to.
because I appreciated knowing that.
Right.
But then when I got,
Yeah, I appreciate too that that would be a misunderstanding for me too. I thought we were supposed to include all for questions like a question about, so that everyone was included in the reply back.
The only time you should have any communication or discussion with anybody else on the Board of Adjustment is in the public hearing that occurs when it's advertised and we're having right now. Otherwise, the state of Florida says, essentially, you're violating the sunshine law because you're communicating, the board is communicating regarding the item without the public being allowed to see what they're saying. And I get it that you think that, well, there's an email record of it, people can see, but that's not what the law reads.
thank you. For
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do the presentation now. So we're here tonight to hear an application. I think this is okay. To hear an application to request a variance for a reduced lot area of 9,375 square feet when 10,000 square feet is required, and a reduced lot frontage of 75 feet where 100 feet is required. The address that we're talking out is 1436 Southeast Lock Boulevard in Stewart. So the board, when they're looking at this, need to go through a number of required findings, steps of required findings. And these are the things that you should be considering as part of this application request. First one is so that it doesn't authorize any use of the property that is not allowed as a permitted use or a use allowed by conditional use in the district which the property is located. In this instance, it's a request for a single family dwelling, which is allowed in this zoning district. Number two, not to allow a density or intensity of use that exceeds the maximum density or intensity that is permitted in the district which the property is located. This property is a low density residential, and the area of the resultant lot will be in compliance with the density requirement for that future land use. The proposal will not result in a verifiable reduction of the property values of any adjacent or nearby properties. I have a bit of analysis on that later in the presentation. Number four, would not cause a detrimental effect in the supply of light and air to adjacent properties. So I want the board to be aware that this request is not to reduce any setbacks from the side boundaries. So all intents and purposes, it would appear to be a house constructed to the zoning requirements of that district. And number five, not to cause a detrimental effect with respect to drainage of the subject property, as well as adjacent properties. Under an application for site plan or building permit for this property, all new development has to comply with FEMA regulations on drainage requirements, which can sometimes mean that the property is raised above adjacent properties. But we actually go with Public Works to inspect and make sure that there's adequate on-site retainage of drainage done at site plan, and that will be taken care of at site plan.
So to clarify, Mr.
Yes.
Friesen, we don't actually have an answer on number five. We just,
Well, it's taken care of as part of any site plan review and building permit process as a separate piece of this. The code requires that developments maintain their drainage on their property. We now require stem wall construction and also, in a lot of cases, berms or drainage ditches around the perimeter of properties specifically if they're higher than neighboring properties. And that's signed off by the city's Public Works Department. Number 6, that it would not cause an increase of traffic on adjacent or nearby roads to levels that are not usual for the types of uses in the neighborhood. This is a residential proposal, and we're not anticipating a substantial increase in the type or volume of traffic in this neighborhood. Number 7, not to cause any threat to public safety in any manner whatsoever. A residential development in a residential area. I think that's a finding that the board would need to think about themselves. Not cause any threat to the health or general welfare of inhabitants of the city. It's a proposed residential single family, and we don't consider that it would cause threat to health or general welfare. So the location of the property, the subject property is south of, on the Southeast Lock Boulevard. You can see it's a primarily and totally actually a residential subdivision of the city of Stewart. The zoning is R1A. The future land use is low density, as is for adjacent properties. The applicant has submitted their request, which included a site sketch, and the request for the variance in this instance is that the lot width be reduced, the requirement from 75 feet from the required 100 feet, and the lot area is reduced to 9,375 square feet from 10,000 square feet required by this zoning district. As I mentioned previously, the density of this property, if developed as such, would comply with future land use requirements. The front setback is not requested any variance. The side setback is not requested for any variance, and the rear setback is not requested for any variance. And furthermore, the proposed will meet the open space requirements. So the proposal is looking at, I think it's for a 4-bedroom, 2-story residential development. 2 floors with the upper floor being reduced in size from the first floor. That is a architectural rendering of the proposal. Staff did carry out a property value comparison analysis of properties just chosen completely at random, trying to select a variety of properties of various sizes in various locations throughout this subdivision. As you can see, there are some quite large properties there and other properties that are smaller than the required zoning lot requirement and lot width requirement of this area. If we tabulate those, we can see that the smaller lots, and there are actually 3 in this example, the first 3 on the list, have certain valuations, and I've got the valuations, they're all coming from the property appraiser's website. So if you work out the value per acre of these properties, you'll see that in fact, these smaller lots have a value of around $2 million per acre, and the larger lots have a lesser value of around $1.2 million per acre. So that, in a way, demonstrates that the value of property, if this type of development is undertaken in this subdivision, does not really affect the value of property as a whole. And in fact, in terms of the amount of value generated on the size of property, it's more than in proportion to a larger lot. I do have some emails that have come in, and I'd like to read those into the record for the board. and you have copies of those in front of you. I'll start with comment number 1. It's from Wayne Barsky. Bonnie and Wayne Barsky of 1417 Southeast Riverside Drive, Stewart. Mr. Freeman, we are homeowners in the St. Lucie Estate subdivision in near proximity to the above captioned property 1436 Southeast Lock. As neighbouring property owner, we are opposed to the variance as requested, as it will adversely affect the character of the neighbourhood by reducing setbacks and increasing density without justification as defined in the City of Stewart Land Development Code. Since we have all been impacted by the national pandemic and are unaware as to when the March hearing date will be rescheduled, please consider this letter our formal objection to the requested variances. It is our understanding that an applicant must demonstrate contrary to the public interest and that due to special conditions, enforcement of city ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship. No unnecessary hardship has been set forth by the applicant in this case. The subject property is a standard rectangular lot that simply does not fit in the current City of Stewart Code for the owner's plans. A property owner's desire to accommodate his needs which are not suitable to the property is not an unnecessary hardship that is addressed by the variance process. It is somewhat puzzling as to why a variance should be considered. As property owners, we are very concerned that this variance may be considered, which will result in increased density and verifiable reduction in property values of nearby properties. Surrounding property owners have a right to rely on the R1A zoning requirements to protect and preserve character of their neighbourhood. Variances from those requirements should be granted only when proof of unnecessary hardship is required. Thank you for your attention in this matter, and we hope that as concerned neighbours, we can rely on preserving the character of this wonderful neighbourhood. That is Bonnie and Wayne Barsky, 1417 Southeast Riverside Drive. Second email is from Sally Alexander and William T. Alexander Jr. This letter was written in March, but still holds true today for the meeting of today's date. I'm writing to you concerning the meeting to be held on March 26. One of the items on the agenda is a variance for property on Southeast Lock Boulevard. This property is adjacent to William T. Alexander's property on 2 sides. He has been there since 1995. The property on Lock was originally part of 300 Southeast Martin Ave. When this property sold, the original owners decided to keep the Lock property and sell it separately, knowing that the front footage needed to be 100 feet. All the owners of the property since have had this roadblock of the property being too small to support a house. I'm sorry the new owners have this same problem, but to allow them to build on a property that is 25% less than the rest of the neighborhood is unconscionable. The whole neighborhood has had to comply with Martin County and the City of Stewart rules, and the new owners should not be an exception. The county should strongly consider turning the request down to rezone the lot to 25% less than the required minimum to build this in this beautiful Stewart neighborhood. It provides contact details. Third email is from Mike Johnson. He doesn't provide an address, but he states, I reside on Riverside Drive. Please accept this email as my written objection to the proposed zoning variance requested on the lot located at 1436 Southeast Lock Boulevard. This lot was created by dividing a larger piece of property into 2 parcels. This division took place with the current R1A zoning rules in place. Dividing a larger piece of property in that way that renders one of the properties unbuildable does not create a hardship. If you allow a variance in this situation, what keeps someone from dividing a parcel that has 150 foot of frontage into 2 non-conforming 75 feet lots and then claiming the hardship on both lots? Will you allow variances in such a situation? It is the same set of facts regarding the lot on which the variance is requested. The proposed variance, if granted, will significantly reduce the value of adjacent property to the west. It is unfair and wrong to grant a variance that benefits those that have not followed the rules and significantly hurts those who abide by the rules. This request does not meet many of the criteria for reviewing a variance, and I am confused as to why staff has recommended approving this variance. These zoning rules are designed to prevent dividing properties in this area to 75 feet lots, and a variance in this situation will only encourage others to use the variance process to circumvent the zoning requirements. I strongly oppose this variance, and the City of Stewart should too. Mike Johnson. We have a comment, the fourth comment from Paula P. Nicoletti, and addresses the chair and members. I have been contacted by Mr. and Mrs. Walsh regarding their desire to build a family home on the above described lot.
Kev, can I stop you for 1 minute?
Yes.
I'm trying to take notes because I have questions and I'm interested in what I have to hear what you're reading. Just have 2
Okay.
seconds here. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I think she said she wants you to read faster.
No,
I'm trying.
I'm trying to write as fast as I can. I can't talk text. Okay.
So I might try and get out by 9 this.
I know, go. Okay, good.
Fine.
Go ahead, please, go. Sorry.
Are we good?
Good, thank you.
Thank you. So this letter is from Paula P. Nicoletti, addressing the chair and members. I have been contacted by Mr. and Mrs. Walsh regarding their desire to build a family home on the above described lot. While the lot is only 75 feet wide, it is clearly deep enough to construct a house which is consistent with the neighborhood. Mr. and Mrs. Walsh did not cause the lot to be this width, and they shouldn't be penalized because of its dimensions. The lot is reminiscent of the many cottage lots which are a hallmark of living in Stewart. There are many places in the city where 75 feet is a required width, and the neighborhood does not suffer. And in St. Lucie Estates, there are several lots which have already been favorably considered by the Board of Adjustment for a lot size and area reduction due to the 1922 platted lot configuration, all without any detriment to the neighborhood. So long as the building proposed meets the setbacks of the R1A zoning, I support and encourage the development of a home on this property. Please consider this application favorably. Yours truly, Paula P. Nicoletti. I also received an analysis from the applicant, which looked at lots of less square frontage, less lot area and frontage than the zoning in this subdivision. They found 28 homes out of 121 non-waterfront properties that did not meet the R1A zoning criteria. With that, staff would hand over to the board. We are minded to recommend approval of this variance, but we're now handing over to the board to do a deliberation of those criteria. Thank you.
Can I just ask,
Questions I'd like to address. Christine, you want to go first?
I just had a question about Paula Nicoletti. Where did she live?
She lives right across the street.
Yes, right across the street.
Okay.
Southeast
By
Lot
the way,
Boulevard. Yeah.
She's going to speak.
She's probably going to speak at public comment. She's present.
She is present.
Okay. Thank you.
Kev, I have a few questions after reviewing the agenda and going through the request for the variance. My confusion, and I apologize if it's, sometimes my questions are great, sometimes they don't make sense, but we are going from a 10,000 square foot lot down to 9375.
Yes.
My question to this, first and foremost, is they've newly purchased this lot, correct?
I'm not sure. I think they're contract purchases of the property. The applicants are here tonight.
It states in here that there's been other buyers of the lot that have gone through this and dealt with this. And so it's, in my mind, there's been disclosure, or there should have been disclosure
I
about
think there's been
this.
full disclosure. The applicants are aware of the situation.
So with their full disclosure in hand, they decided to go against what is already recommended for an R1 zoning ordinance. which is why they're here. When you look at the size change from a 10,000 square foot down to 975, what I'm not understanding is in the agenda, it states that there's no request for any other side back variances. And how is that possible if the house,
It's a 6% reduction in the size of the lot. You can still, whatever the setbacks are on that, you build a smaller property.
If I could just chime in, if you have a 100-foot wide lot
right?
and you have two 10-foot wide setbacks, you
Yes.
can build an 80-foot wide house. If you have a 75-foot wide lot and you have two 10-foot setbacks, you build a 65 or a 55-foot wide house, and it still meets the setbacks.
So they're meeting all setbacks. It's just the only thing is that we're building on the 10,000 square foot is our zone requirement.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just continue on and then I'll send it over to Alex because I know he looks like he has some questions. Email number 1, understanding, we just got these today. Is that a normal procedure just so we're not too far?
I got some of email one actually came in some while ago, but because of the not knowing when the hearing was going to be, I was trying to gather any comments I had, and I received emails this week.
Okay,
It is very common for emails to be presented as Kevin
that's
did
what
at the meeting.
Okay,
The other thing is that it's not inappropriate for people to send emails directly to board members as well as the process goes on. If they send them to the city to present to the board, then Kevin's best method to present them to the void and avoid sunshine is to present them during the meeting
correct.
so that he makes sure that it takes place appropriately. So that's not unusual. The LPA board was presented with 237 emails from Jane Cornett at the light meeting last week.
That must
So-
have been fun.
Can I follow up on that and just ask if we do receive an email from somebody outside, or do we have a duty to pass it on pursuant to sunshine?
You don't have any requirement to send it to us. Obviously, if the person sends you the email and says, I would like you to share this with the board, you can't share it with the board. So you have to share it with Kevin so he can disseminate it for you. But, you know, it influences you. So, you know, if you brought it or gave it to development, they would then include it like Kevin did today. If you don't, it's no different than bumping into somebody in the grocery store and then telling you how they feel.
Thank you.
Going back to the first email, comment number 1, Kevin, I know that you're recommending this variance. My question to each of these emails is, he keeps discussing the density increase. We're not increasing density there. It's still a family.
Well, and the density as a result, if you do the calculation, is still within the low density residential.
A
Right.
density increase, if you have a 1 acre lot
Right.
and you build one house on it, it's 1 unit per acre.
Mhm.
If you have a ½ acre lot and you build one house on it, it's 2 units per acre
Mhm.
because of the size of the lot. So in this case, if you reduce the lot size, you do increase the density. However, as Mr. Freeman points out, R1 zoning allows lot size or the equivalent of up to 7 units per acre. So 9,375 square feet does not violate the comp plan and or the zoning requirement because that still falls within that low density residential zoning future land use.
Okay.
I know it gets complicated, but we
It
can
doesn't.
talk about it.
I'm trying to decipher really why this has been brought before us, except for the fact that we're going from 10,000 to 9,375. I mean, all the other setbacks are in the same place.
Yes.
It's not affecting any of the neighboring communities. And I'm reading these emails trying to decipher why we're here. Is that only reason? But what is the hardship to these neighbors? And it's, I mean, if it was too tall and causing shadows, that's one thing.
And maybe you should hear the rest of the board comments.
Okay.
and then
Okay, then
debate because what you do is you hear comments, ask questions and answers, and then what you're doing right now is having a dialogue or
myself.
discussing the matter. That's what the board should do after public comment and after or after you've at least shared your questions.
Okay.
So we should still ask questions about the project, though. We can still,
No, that's
Parking.
where we're at right now. The board should be asking staff and or the applicant any questions they have to clarify the issues before the board deliberates.
So just going back to why does this lot exist if no one can build on it? I'm very confused still. Can this be explained further? I'm confused. I heard in that one letter that something happened while it was maybe illegally subdivided.
A prior owner carved it off.
And, okay, so for example, in my neighborhood, I have a neighbor who sold 10 foot of his lot to his neighbor so that they could potentially build a garage in the future. So you can just go ahead and sell as much parcel of you that you want of your own property to anyone.
Well, technically, yes, you could sell whatever you wanted. Now, what happens is your house, let's say you had a 100-foot wide lot and you sold your next door neighbor 30 feet. Now your house is only on a 70-foot wide lot. So now it's a non-conforming house. If it were to burn down, you can't build it back. But you got the cash when you sold it.
Okay. Interesting. Good to know.
I'm finished, Alex.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Freeman, the record now currently reflects all comment from all people as you've received
As
it.
far as I'm aware, yes.
Okay. And as a point of clarification, Mr. Alexander, who sent the email, is different than Mr. Alexander referenced in the email. One of them has junior.
For William Alexander. So, Sally Alexander. POA for William T. Alexander. It's difficult to make out. There's no address attached to this, really.
Okay. The addendum put forth that you referenced showing the non-conforming lots says that 63% of the, or 63, I'm sorry, a large number, let's see, 121 non-waterfront, 63 waterfront homes, so that's 184, 28 of which are non-conforming. I was just curious how 28 became non-conforming.
I think it's just the way over time properties were built out. Code may then have overlaid them, even though they were in that situation. There have been variances granted in this location before to reduce lot area and lot size.
The adjacent lot, I think it's lot 5 of the original plat. That is pretty small for building.
That is actually part of a property to make the property whole in terms of R1 zoning, R1A zoning. That's, is it, I don't know, it's on Martin
It's on Lark.
Lock.
Oh, I'm sorry, Oriole.
It's on-
Oriole, yeah. So that property is more of an L shape.
Mhm.
So that was acquired to create a lot that had a lot area of greater than 10,000 square feet. And I know there was some discussion with that potential, with that property owner to, donate a bit of that property because it's much more than 10,000 square feet to this property to enable this lot property to become whole.
But that property owner has not weighed into this process at all.
I think that one of the comments actually is from captions. Just go through these in 1 second. I think it's comment number 1. They say they don't give their address. I don't. Oh, they do.
Well, he's on Riverside. so that's
Riverside
not
Drive.
straight.
But they say there is a
in the
neighboring
second
property owner.
email from the Alexanders, it references a William T. Alexander, but it's signed by a William T. Alexander Jr. So I'm not sure if that's somewhat of relation.
Yeah.
But so to your knowledge, we haven't heard from the property owner with the neighboring 2 lots or the adjacent.
Not that I'm aware.
So the statute or the ordinance rather requires all the things we went over and a hardship. And what is the hardship in this situation?
Well, that is always a question, whether or not the lot has been created and forms its own hardship now to future development, or is it's not been obviously created by the applicants themselves. It was created by a previous or current owner
But with full disclosure.
with full disclosure.
But they're not actually the owners now, they're a contingent owner?
I think you'd have to.
Okay,
confirm that with
we'll ask them when that
yes.
time's
Yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah.
But in terms of hardship, doesn't the ordinance have a definition of hardship?
It does, but unfortunately, I haven't printed that piece out.
Give me a second, I'll pull it up.
I think it's 8501. For some reason that didn't print out.
In the LER.
Yeah, I think it's probably 84.
1 second.
And Kev, with Alex being newer to the board, this is something that we've had issues with this whole time with
Right.
this board. And we were supposed to have a
Yes.
meeting regarding
Yes.
the statute because
Yes. We are, as staff, working on alternative ways of dealing with variance requests. That's been made more complicated by certain other decisions that the commission have made. So we're trying to get a handle on the viewpoint of encouraging smaller lot development in certain neighborhoods and whether this neighborhood would be one of those neighborhoods. It's always a difficult subject when we're dealing with neighborhoods to talk to them about infill properties. But as you see, even with this R1A neighborhood, it's a historic neighborhood. There are a decent proportion of properties in that neighborhood that already do not meet the minimum lot area requirements.
which again makes.
When you drive, and I would say, if you visit one of those streets and drive down those streets, it's not really apparent from viewing the street itself, the structure of the street, the rhythm of the street, or the character of that street, that you notice a small lot actually stand out. They're part of the character of Stewart in a way.
Section 8.05.02 of the code states, the Board of Adjustment shall have the power to authorize in specific cases such variances from the provisions set forth in section 80401A, which will not be contrary to the public interest where, owing to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the provisions of certain parts of this code will, in an individual case, result in unnecessary hardship, so that the spirit of the code shall be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and substantial justice done. Such variance may be granted in such case of unnecessary hardship upon the following findings by the Board of Adjustment. B, required findings. The need for the proposed variance is attributable to unique characteristics of the property, either as to the land or as to any improvements thereon, or both, and the proposed variance, if granted, will not, 1, authorize any use of the property that is not allowed as a permitted use or use allowed by conditional use in a district in which a property is located, and 2, allow a density or intensity of use that exceeds the maximum density or intensity that is permitted in the district which the property is located, and 3, result in a verifiable reduction of the property values of an adjacent or nearby property. 4, cause a detrimental effect in the supply of light and air to adjacent properties. 5, cause a detrimental effect with respect to drainage of the subject property as well as adjacent properties. 6, cause an increase of traffic on adjacent or nearby roads to levels that are not usual for that type of use in the neighborhood. 7, cause any threat to public safety in any manner whatsoever. 8, cause any threat to health or general welfare of the inhabitants of the city. C, a variance shall not be granted that exceeds the minimum variance to the strict application of the provisions of this code to alleviate the unnecessary hardship. So that's why we have a board. It's in reality, that's what it is. It is the Board of Adjustment is designed to say that we don't live in a rigid society, that we live in a situation where some guy can't write a code in a cubicle somewhere and expect it to hold up to every single house and every single lot in the entire city for the next 25 years, because that just never happens. So there's a method for property owners to come forward and be reviewed by their community members and make sure that they are proposing and seeking to stay within the confines of the intention of the zoning that is that area, and that, you know, that they're not obviously ripping everybody off or whatever. And that's where you start getting into the hardship stuff and self-imposed versus, you know, not self-imposed. Because, for example, if I right now carved my lot down to 30 feet wide and kept just where my house is and sold everything else off, and then came in and said, I'd like a 30-foot wide lot because I don't have any other land left, the Board of Adjustment would say, well, I self-impose that. No, you know, that wouldn't be reasonable. And so the reason that the ones you see are the ones that are close, that the board has to decide.
Mike, is it possible, since that's kind of a short statute, just to have that printed and available for our meetings? It's nice to refer back to those to remind us of.
Sure, I'll have them attach it to the agenda.
I think it'd be great just to refer back to that.
On page 14 of 31, what he just read is there. And on page 15.
Poof, and I did it.
There you go.
There you go.
I was so focused on the numbers up top, I didn't even read the bottom one.
Well, and when you see it, it's not, it probably doesn't say this is the code, so you don't catch it when you're reading it that way.
So just, that's the, can we read one more time the definition of hardship? I'm sorry.
I don't know if there's a lot of, I think 801 says what a hardship is too. Hold on. 8.02.00 is titled hardship. 8.02.01, the purpose of this section is to provide mechanisms for obtaining relief from the provisions of this code where hardship would otherwise occur. 2 forms of hardship are addressed. 1, Part 8.03 addresses hardship that would be caused if non-conforming development were required to immediately come into compliance. And 2, 8.04 addresses the hardship that may be caused in particular cases by the imposition of the code's development design standards. 8.03 relates to existing land use. An exception to the elimination of a non-conforming use, structures and lots may be granted by the City Commission for good cause shown if the 3 following conditions are met. Number 1, an existing non-conforming structure or conforming structure with non-conforming use is destroyed by accident or act of God. And this would be like someone that's already buys a house that was built in the 30s that's in a 60-foot wide lot right now. Hurricane comes and knocks their house down. They come back in to get a building permit. We say, sorry, your house got wiped out. It's gone. The next one is the majority of landowners within 300 feet support the rebuilding of the structure in its prior state. And 3, the rebuilding of the reuse does not pose a detriment to the public health. This is a vacant lot, so this doesn't apply because it's not rebuilding. Section 8.03.01 is non-conforming uses and lots. And essentially, this is a non-conforming lot. Non-conforming usage, I'm trying to see, in those instances where structural additions or modifications are proposed to 1 and 2 family residential non-conforming structures, no variance shall be required to construct additions or modifications, which by virtue of the proposed structural additions or modification would otherwise render it illegal. That doesn't apply to this. Hold on. The lawful use of land existing on July 3rd, 1990, although such use does not conform to the provisions of the chapter, may be continued. So it says any lot that was being used as a house with a house on it prior to July of 1990 was considered, we're grandfathering all those in. However, no such non-conforming use shall be enlarged or increased, nor shall any non-conforming use be extended to occupy a greater area of land than that occupied by such use at the time of the passage of this chapter. If such non-conforming use is discontinued for periods of not less than 365 days, any future use of said land shall be in conformity with this chapter. That's the structure alterations. Non-conforming lots of record. Non-conforming lots of record shall be permitted to continue subject to the following. Where a lot has an area or width or both less than the minimum set out and was a lot of record on March 25th, 1968, said lot is allowed to be occupied by a single family dwelling or accessory units, provided the lot conforms with the minimum lot area and width requirements of the next lower residential district. That is not the case here because this lot, I don't believe existed as its current state in 1968. Such lots shall conform to all other design requirements, etc., but that doesn't apply. So we get all the way back down to variances, and it says, the Board of Adjustment may grant a variance from the strict application of the following dimensional requirements of the city land development regulations and the city code, which is subsection 2.04.00 regarding lot area requirements and minimum yard setbacks, as well as 6.09.0 regarding setbacks, which this doesn't apply. Finish 4 doesn't apply. So it's just regarding lot area, which is 2.04.00, and that is the 10,000 square foot lot versus a 9,375 foot lot. And then it says, and that's what Kevin presented to you essentially in his presentation earlier. And then it gets into, the code goes on to say, variances to be considered as part of the plan review document. Any person desiring to undertake a development activity not in conformance with this code may apply for a variance in conjunction with the application for plan document review. A development activity pursuant to the provisions set forth in subsection A above that might otherwise be approved by the director, must be approved by the Board of Adjustment if a variance is sought. The variance shall be granted or denied in conjunction with the application for plan review. In granting a variance, the Board of Adjustment may prescribe appropriate conditions and safeguards. Initial determination. The Board of Adjustment shall have the power to authorize, in specific cases, variances from the provisions set forth herein, which will not be contrary to public interest, where owing to special conditions, a literal enforcement of the provision of certain parts of this code will, in an individual case, result in unnecessary hardship, so that the spirit of the code shall be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and substantial justice done. Such variance may be granted in such case of unnecessary hardship upon the following findings by the board. And then I read those findings earlier, and that is, it can't increase the density, which this doesn't. It can't authorize any use of the property that is not allowed as a permitted use. This already is a permitted use. It can't cause a detrimental effect in the supply of light and air to adjacent properties. It can't cause a detrimental effect with respect to drainage, and Mr. Freeman pointed out that the building code requires that to be solved. It can't cause an increase in traffic to levels that are not usual for the type of use in the neighborhood. It can't cause a threat to public safety, and it can't be a threat to the health or general welfare of the inhabitants of the city. And so then we go back to, it's a question of a literal enforcement of the provisions of a certain parts of this code will, in an individual case, result in unnecessary hardship. So is the denial of this creating an unnecessary hardship to the applicant?
Madam Chair, I've lived on Flamingo Avenue since 1973. And just last year, when my neighbor wanted to put up a fence, I found out it was, and I had my property surveyed. I thought we had it surveyed properly in that. But in that area, it's amazing how the lots guess what one old timer said, it used to be, can I do this? Oh, sure, go ahead. They didn't pull permits or anything. So if, you know, I'm sure that Mr. Alexander who owned this land, he was like an old timer, well, 95. He's kind of younger than I am, but and you'd be surprised how many, and they'll probably be coming up a lot more before the board and that. You think, oh, my lot's in compliance, and you come to find out, you know, and it is a hardship if you want to build a home and you found the ideal lot. And let's face it, I'm not bragging, but location. And it, you know, it's 9,000, it's only 625 foot.
Well, it's square feet, so it's different, but yeah. I get
Yeah,
The frontage also,
Yeah,
the frontage of the lot
yeah.
being 75 versus
Well,
300, 100.
They just allow 4 houses to be built on Dolphin and Fifth Street. My God, when they put those 2 houses, one house has hardly any frontage and the other one, yeah, but that's the way the land was in that. So, I mean, you know, we have to take in consideration what the old timers did. And this was all flower farm land, you know, back in the day. I just thought as you know, as an old time resident, I fill you in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As the director, or as the chair, you also have the right to ask for public comment if you guys want to hear the feedback from anybody online or people here before you deliberate further as well.
Well, we also have the applicant who might want to.
Oh, yeah, sure,
speak.
absolutely. We want, before the presentation is over, the applicant probably wants to give you their position and let you know what their hardship is and how they feel.
Kev,
Board
one
Member
question
Vogel?
I have.
Board Member Vogel, did you have something?
I do. Let TJ go. I'll let TJ go first. Go ahead.
The R1A is the 100-foot requirement. Where they
Yes.
did a lot of the cottage lots or the shotgun homes, that's in R1, correct? An R1 zoning that allows 7,500 square
75,
feet
yes,
or
75.
75 feet wide.
R1A is 100.
Yes.
Is this, was this from you or?
No, that was from the applicant. You might want to ask
So
them.
nobody's verified this?
Other than the little experiment I did, or the, you
I
some
know we had that
random-
fancy map at the office.
Yeah, I did not do
Okay.
that. That was submitted to me.
Great question.
I have a question if you're done, TJ.
Yep.
So my records, like when I use the GIS map for City of Stewart, I saw that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the lot was split in 2006.
I think that's
That's
correct. Yes.
Okay, and then, so when you were reading through the requirements, grandfathered lot would be 2000 and earlier?
Yes.
I think it was, yeah, it may have been, I know it was before 2006. I don't
Okay.
remember exactly what I read, but
When you were reading it, I heard the 2000. So now I understand that, you know, the new, I don't know if they're officially the owner of the lot yet, but I understand that they're in a pickle, but the original lot owner is making a profit, correct? Off of just selling some of their lot?
I would assume it's, I mean, I don't know what a profit means to you and what the profit means to them, but I
Right.
assume they're getting paid some consideration for the parcel.
Right. So you're rewarding possibly that person that bought the lot intentionally knowing that it couldn't have had a house built on it.
I think that's where we are, yes.
What lot was split? 5 and 6 or 5 and 4? In 2006, what lot was?
So, I'm sorry. I'm looking at a different lot.
For you to bring up what do we call our
What is
map
it, TJ?
system?
You.
What's the Sailfish compass? So the city managers are going to bring up Sailfish Compass, and you're going to be able to see the parcels that are being addressed. Everybody catch this password?
Man, I didn't see it. Can you go back? I'm sure he uses it for everything.
So I will tell you, one of the things that you can look at is when you see this corner lot, recognize that if you grant the variance, they're going to build a house obviously on it. And if you deny the variance, they won't. So as we zoom in, I used to live on the corner of Clark and Oriole, so I know which lot it is. We all small town.
Right, so what you're saying is that in the future, person that owns that lot, well, no, because they don't own 1, 2, and 3
So
as well. Can anything be built on it? Nothing, ever.
this, I think if you back up here, just in here. I think if you're too soon, maybe you'll lose the yellow. Okay, so when we discussed this guy, in order to get a 10,000 square foot lot, he had to use this section of the lot right here to go all the way up here. So this is 10,000 square feet. This lot then becomes the one that's at issue.
Is that a newer home that he did that on?
I don't know. This could have been one whole lot this way, and he carved it off to keep it parcel. I don't know how it was carved up, or it could have been this way, and this was a lot. I personally don't have the history of it, but the other thing is, if you look at visually there, right now it looks like there's an empty lot where a house would go there.
Yeah.
But the little square in the middle, or the square in the middle is where the house is going to go. The dilemma becomes that elongated lot chimney thing.
Where's the
Right,
house is going? Right there, right?
right there.
And that neighbor is that Alexander T? When you just clicked on that, what popped up?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the email.
And that's the email that is saying that's opposing?
Is saying what?
It's objecting.
It's objecting?
You don't want to.
That's correct.
Okay. So to clarify, the house to the right, the red roof, in 2006, sold off its west parcel, its west property, and sold it knowing that no one could build, and intentionally. And then also, just to point out, if lot to the south sold off his lot, that's the L-shaped lot, then his lot would not meet the frontage requirements.
Right. I don't know if the red roof is 10,000 square feet still or not either. Okay.
So just pointing out, even if that person sold a part of their lot, that part of that L, then they wouldn't conform anymore.
Right.
So it is in a pickle, basically.
So I think if you do look at that image, I could understand why the lot was split off in the way that it was. The existing property would need to be 10 feet off of the resultant lot split, which is the north-south split. And so that's why that line is in that location. If the red roof property was more to the east, then that lot would have been split, I believe, closer. The red roof property is in excess of 10,000 square feet.
And I'm not telling you what a hardship is or not a hardship, because honestly, that's the board's thing. I am wondering, so logistically, does that corner look like a house belongs? Like if you, like right there, if you drove through that neighborhood and a house got built on that corner, would it look out of place?
I wonder if the house with the red roof, does it look like he's got 10 foot on his property?
Well, those property lines aren't perfect. That's just a map thing in the angle too, but rest assured, he probably has the 10 feet. And you know, as Christina said, I mean, the reality is he probably did get paid. He took profit out of his lot by selling off an excess portion of it
It's just
that
business.
at the time wasn't buildable. moving forward, and I understand the neighbors' objections. I lived literally in the kitty corner house across from it, and that lot was vacant the whole time I lived there because the house has never been there. But it always seemed to me like I didn't realize the lots were carved up the way they were when I lived there. I just figured no one was building yet. But the question is, what would this parcel or this area, of course I would object if I knew that it was going to stay vacant and be a park forever and, at the expense to the community, but having neighbors is a good thing too. So I don't, I'm not saying I'm in favor of it or against it as far as the staff is concerned. I'm just saying when I look at it, it's hard to decide the hardship.
It's hard to decide the hardship.
I could sit here and I could spend an hour saying reasons to do it, and I could spend an hour telling you reasons not to.
Well, that's the joy of our board.
Right.
Well, also, if we approve this, it's not setting a precedent, as you've always said. It's not setting a precedent for future people to do this.
Well, and part of the reason for that is because every lot is different.
Exactly.
Quite frankly, I'm trying to find 2 lots in that neighborhood right now, looking at the carved up models that are the same. Oh, those 2 might be pretty close. But like out of all the others, above and below and to the right.
I'd like to get feedback from the audience and just get a second.
Shall we turn it over to the applicant?
I would like to turn it over to the applicant if no one else has any questions on the board.
No.
Christina, are you okay?
I'm all good. Thank you.
Please state your name.
Hi, my name's Nanette Walsh,
I'm Jeffrey Walsh.
and so
Who are you?
my husband and I are under contract for this lot,
Okay.
knowing completely where the couple that own it, where they stand. And we knew that it was non-compliant, and we chose to see if we could make it compliant. Our 20-year residents of Martin County. My husband and I are both business owners in this downtown Stewart area, and we live in Palm City. So we raised our 3 boys. They all went to Jensen Beach High School. We love Stewart, and now we commute from Palm City every day. And it's just always been a dream of ours to live in the downtown Stewart area. We participate in a lot of community events, a lot of charities. I'm involved in a lot of giving in the community, and I just really want to be part of it by living in the community. And so when I saw this lot, we chose to see if we could make it doable. We went to Kevin and spoke to him. And so I did the research from the homes in that R1A zoning area. And the information that I got was from the current tax records. So the lot square footage is from the tax records, and the frontage is from the current tax records. And that was done yesterday, so I made sure it was as current as possible. And you can see from there are a lot of homes in the R1A. That 28 is a large number. And if you look at homes that are not waterfront property, it makes up a 23% of the area, which again, I think boasts to the character of Stewart, is that you drive around and you see a large home, and then you see a cottage type home. And the home that my husband and I would like to build, we specifically would like it to fit into that character of the community and not be ostentatious or overbearing, and just it fits all the setbacks. And so we just it's really a dream of ours. My husband is a home builder, and we moved to Palm City, and we did not build our home because our boys were small at the time, and they're now 20, 21, and 22. So it's just a dream of ours to be able to build our own home and live in a town that we call home and we love and we participate in. And we're not a developer coming in to just build something and leave. And we want to make this our community and our home. And it's really just important to us to make it work. And we just would appreciate any kind of effort you could give to help us to make this dream a possibility.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say that we will be stewards of the neighborhood. We'll be walking our dog, riding our bicycles, and I don't think we'll put any hardship on the community at all. I think the house will be beautiful and will actually help the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Just a couple questions for you, if that's okay, Madam Chair. I hope it's not an inappropriate question, but is your contract contingent on this approval?
Yeah, our contract is contingent. We've written 5 addendums because we keep getting pushed back with.
Sure.
And the couple that own it, they're in Naples, and they, are just not in a position to do what we're doing right now. And so, they're hoping that we can make this work, obviously, and we're hoping it can too. So the contract is contingent upon approval here. If it's denied, then they're still their lot. So, and it'll be an empty lot for, and unfortunately it does look like a house belongs there, so anyway.
Also, I personally think it looks like a good fit, but I am concerned what the neighbor thinks, who has 2 adjacent sides to the lot. What would you say to that neighbor if they were here?
So the Alexander neighbor, it's the son that lives there, and I have not been able to, the son is actually the junior, he's the owner. I think the email was written by the mom, and that's the only person I've been able to talk to. She doesn't live there. She runs his affairs. He's owned the home for several years, so I assume he's in his 40s or something. But she, the mother, when this whole first thing started, I did go to her, and you know how it's like that L shape? Kevin had showed us if we just purchased a little section, so then we'd have the proper frontage, we'd have 100 feet frontage, and we'd have 10,000 square feet. I went to her. She was very not agreeable because she says they're going to build a garage or a pool on that section. So good luck to them on that. But, I said, okay, thank you. That's okay. And so then we had to pursue this because they were not willing to just give us a little tiny strip along Lark is what we had hoped to do, because we thought maybe help them and then help us, and it would be a good win-win situation, but it didn't work out. So, yeah.
Any other questions for the home or possible? I just want to state for the record, this is a place that you're building to live in yourself.
Oh yeah, this is our forever home, really. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They are free to change their mind, though.
No,
We
I know.
can't
I
make
was
that
just-
a deed restriction. It's not prison.
No, I get that. I was just making
Right.
sure.
Yeah. But we
You can sell it. You can sell it next year. I'm just making sure that you.
Well, we're both we're involved in the city.
Yeah. I'm just curious.
That was like an interview to be a city resident.
Right. Now we can vote on whether they can move here or not.
Exactly. We'll let you know. How do you make cookies?
If you sounded like me, I keep saying I'm going to die in the house.
Mike, we're going to go ahead and take
Public comment?
public comment.
I'm assuming that there's only one.
There is only
Mrs.
one.
Nicoletti knows.
I have one online as well.
I'm Paula
Oh, we do have
Nicoletti.
one online? Okay.
Do you want me to go?
Yep, go ahead, Steve.
I'm Paula Nicoletti. I live at 1445 Southeast Lark. And on the map, we have quite a large home across the street. I would, first of all, I want to let you know, I don't know the Walshes. I just received the same information everyone else did about the fact they wanted to build the house. And did a little investigating. So when you were talking about 2006, I have the 2 papers that show the distribution deed. Apparently a woman named Florence Dewberry
passed away, and she owned all of those lots. And Bo Lowry was the gentleman who had the lots and sold off part of them. So he kept 2.5 lots and left 1.5 lots, which is the lots the Walshes are speaking about. So that's what happened in 2006. I don't know who approved that or how that happened, but in fact, that's how the property was divided.
If I can chime in,
I
the
can
city
see-
does not approve any of it. If someone sells their property, they simply do a deed and record it at the property appraiser's office, and that's that. It doesn't require approval or a conditional board to see it. So a lot of times that'll happen and the city has no party to it.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. So at least you understand, you know, what we were able to find out about that. I would just say that we have probably one of the most expensive homes in the area that's not on the water. We have over 6,000 square feet. I look at that empty lot every day, and I think it would be the great thing about living in that neighborhood and why we chose to live there is because it's fun. You know, every home is different. Some are small, some are large, some are medium, all different designs, but it's a very easy, friendly neighborhood. We have the golf carts, as you know, in that area. And we would welcome this couple to be able to build their home. And I will tell you, just on a personal note, I kind of think it's selfish for people not to allow the variance, because there's certainly homes that are 50 feet as well. The one right behind the red roof house is only a 50-foot frontage. So I hope you would consider this. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Paul. Thank you.
If anyone else attending online would like to give public comment, please press participants and raise your hand. If you're attending by telephone, press *9. Subject attending with phone number 224.
Hi, my name is Dan Kushner, and I own the property at 221 Martin, which is across the street from Paula's house on Martin Avenue. I really appreciate the review that was done here, because it was very hard for me to understand how there was that piece of empty property and it looked like there were 2 lots there. I also don't know the Walshes, and I understand, you know, their desire to live in the city of Stewart. I've lived in Stewart for several years, and I'm getting ready to build a new house at 221 Martin. I guess, you know, the real question for me is, and it's really difficult because it seemed like the way that it looked anyway was that the lot was being split now, and that's not the case. So that was some misinformation that I had. Certainly, I believe that we should try to keep the lot sizes in what was designed to give the character of the neighborhood. And I understand their request for the change to the frontage. Understanding that now, I probably don't have the same concerns that I did before. The way I looked at it was there was going to be 2 lots, and one of them would be 55 feet frontage in a very narrow, skinny lot, and somebody was going to try and build a house on that piece of property. All I would ask is that the board would not allow that to happen. They would not allow that, and if that property is sold, they would not allow another house to be built on the corner, because that would be destructive to the neighborhood. That being said, as far as an increase in density, that could cause an increase in density, because if a house could be built there, there would be an increase in density. But otherwise, I really don't have an objection now that I've heard all of the speaking that's occurred here today. So with that, I will now be quiet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Do you need to?
Do you want to?
Do you need to address that? Because we can't have any concern with the future.
So it's funny because when we were looking at the map, one of the things I said is that when I lived there as well, that the corner looks like a house should go there. And the gentleman that just spoke said, yeah, a house should go there, but not two. So the problem is though, the actual chimney portion of that part where the Alexander, whatever the name was going to build a pool one day or whatever that might be. They're not a party to this application. So we don't have technically what I would call jurisdiction over them to give a deed restriction to this approval to their lot. The only deed restriction that can be granted by this board today pertains to the middle lot that the arrow's on right now. The gentleman's concern was that that lot to the left, and I don't know if that's 55 feet wide or not, but that somebody would come in the future, ask for another variance and say, well, gosh, you let this guy next door to me have it, why won't you let me have it? And we've seen this board say no to that before, but I don't have the ability to put a deed restriction on that parcel at this time. You only have the ability to put restrictions on the parcel that the Walshes are applying for today. And quite frankly, I'm not suggesting you should put any additional deed restrictions on that. What's that measurement, David? Check that. What about the one on Lark? Like at the top of that chimney there, or whatever it is. Right? Yeah, there. So that could be 50 feet wide. I mean, because that's not a perfect measurement that we're making right now.
That doesn't even.
A survey can come in at 50 feet, so.
Do you have the tab on that to pull up the zoning in that neighborhood?
Zoning? Neighborhood is R1.
It's all R1A?
Yeah,
Yes.
there it goes.
Okay.
The only thing they could build there is a garage or a pool and have, the garage can have 5 foot, I believe, 5 foot setbacks off of it. So in the future, there will possibly be a garage there.
Unless the applicant cut it off right parallel to their house down below, the same yellow right there where the arrow is, and then came in to the Board of Adjustment and asked for a variance to approve a 50-foot wide lot at 7,500 square feet, and the Board of Adjustment granted it. Right now, you're absolutely right, Christina, there is no zoning that would allow that to happen. But this board has the ability to grant variances. I think that would be significantly different than a couple hundred, than 500 feet off of a 10,000 square foot lot that we're here before tonight.
Mr. Mortel, just to clarify, if I can, Madam Chair, if we were to grant this today, it would in no way infringe upon the neighboring Mr. Alexander's property in anything that they can do today.
It doesn't impact them in any way. They could still build whatever they can build, right? Now, of course, it would allow for a house to be adjacent to them that they are objecting to.
On a motion? I move that we accept the variance at this time. Thank you.
Anyone second? I can't. Oh, I can't second it.
If there's, well, Kristen, you can't motion, you're the
That's what I
chair.
said. He can't either. 'cause
So
he's raised.
if there's no second, it would die for lack of a second.
Can I see everyone again? Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you.
We're looking for a second to Helen's motion to approve the variance, Christina.
I'll second it.
And we got it from Alex. All in favor?
Well, first,
Oh, oh,
when we get to the actual code zone, like the zoning change or whatever, it's not at all in favor. It would be a roll call. And prior to granting or calling roll, we normally ask for public comment. So we just have to make sure there's no public comment on the motion. So you'd ask now for public comment.
Do we have any public comment on the motion?
And then seeing none, you would direct the clerk to
I
call
see
roll.
none online either.
Okay. The clerk call roll
Chair Stanley,
in favor.
Vice Chair Fridas,
In favor?
Board Member Dillon,
Aye.
Board Member Vogel,
In favor.
Board Member McBride.
In favor.
I can't read. Somebody's getting old.
With that, you can
Adjourn.
adjourn. Yeah.
Now I'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you very much for your time.
Good luck, guys.
Welcome to Stewart.
Yeah.
You like-
Thank you for the virtual.
Thank you, board member.
I feel like it's taking my shoe